began studying dancing. One summer, I went to New York with my dancing teacher, Charlotte Whedon. Charlotte came into the apartment one day and said, she'd picked up an Atlantic Monthly, and she said, I have an interesting article here about a man. Would you like to read it? I said, well, certainly I would. It was called The Philosopher's Stone, and it was about a man by the name F. Matthias Alexander. I read 2 books he had written, and I got so fascinated with them that I just knew I wanted to study with him. So I closed my dancing studio and went to England. My sister went with me. My mother didn't think it was very wise for a little green country girl like me to go off to the big city of London all alone. So we went off. And of course there weren't planes flying in those days. You went by ship. And we landed in England in a pea soup fog, which neither of us had ever heard of or seen. But we finally found the train and made our way to London. And then we found a place to live with an English couple who had 2 small children. It was real exciting. And then I met Mr. Alexander. I found him to be a charming English gentleman. He was a great Shakespearean reciter and actor. And there was a time when he practically lost his voice. He studied himself for clues to find out what was wrong. Finally, one time he discovered that just before he started to perform, he threw his head back and down. He got a very heavy pressure in the back of his neck. He found out that he could release that downward pressure by simply moving his head slightly away from his body. And he noticed as his head moved very slightly away from his body that there was a tendency for his body to move along with it. Then he began to see how often we just push ourselves up and stick our chests out and pull our shoulders back. That's a fixture. Now, you don't hold that very long, because if you're going into activity, you really want flexibility. And if I do a little thing like this, and I move around, then I've lost that downward pull, and I'm allowing my respiratory mechanism to have a chance to function. And gradually, as he could continue with that, his hoarseness disappeared and he had no more trouble with his voice. He began to tell his friends about what he was doing. And his friends began to say, well, why don't you help us if this is so good for you? They were having some of the same problems. So he started helping them. Word spread, and soon people were coming from all over the world to study with him. He worked with John Dewey, George Bernard Shaw. Aldous Huxley even made Alexander into a character in one of his novels. I was the first person to finish Alexander's first teacher's training course. When I left England, I knew I had learned a great deal about his discovery. Children move lightly and easily. If you learn to watch, you will notice that their little heads always start any movement they make. And you see, we have interfered with that. Alexander's discovery gives us back our natural, much more of our natural ease and flexibility of movement. So you see, it's a form of movement.
Could you show us what you mean by that? It's a form of movement? Could you demonstrate it for us?
Oh.
You don't try to find
Yes.
a book and describe what you
Most people, in picking up a book, if you'd watch them, they'd come down this way to pick up the book. Now, look what they've done. See how they pulled their body down? And see the pressure I have here? Now, they don't feel that because they've grown up doing that for a long time. Now, there's no reason why, if I want to pick that up, I just don't leave my body alone. Where do I move from in both instances? My hip joint is where I really move from. Now, if I move from my hip joint, all I have to do is move my arm to pick up the book. There's no reason why I have to add this to the fact that I want to put the book down or pick it up. That's a very, very simple way to demonstrate it, but that's the thing we do. And Alexander's work is very simple, and as you say, it's extremely elusive, but it's the ease in which you redirect that energy so that the downward pressures just can't exist. He gently put his hands, one hand very delicately here, and another hand very delicately back here. And he would ask us to think of noticing what his hands were doing and allowing our heads to move just a tiny bit in the direction he was suggesting. And that's the same thing here. I'm helping you with this little bit of ease to understand it, both from a thinking point of view and the ease with which you can move. Now, as I help you here and link your body up with that, now you're the one who has to remember to carry those two things on while you play. I can't do that for you. That's where your responsibility comes in. See? So you can trust your own reasoning and go ahead and just make up your mind, this is the thing you're going to do, and your arms fit into it.
That's very different.
No, it's different, but it's fun. It's quite fascinating. It's when you have that experience that you really begin to understand what Alexander's discovered.